على رسولنا محمد وآله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. One could easily argue that among the biggest events in the life of Muhammad ﷺ, and definitely among the biggest events in the history of Islam, and in a lot of ways a big event, at the very least a big event in the history of the world, was the conversion of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, or his entrance into Islam. A few decades after his conversion, he was the Khalifa, and under his rule, Islam spread the farthest than it did under anybody else. And so it grew under the Rasul ﷺ, it grew a little bit under Abu Bakr, but then it really expanded and took off under the guidance of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, or at least through his leadership, or at the time that he was leading it. But most historians, when they write about Sayyidina Umar's conversion, they all say, Sayyidina Abu Bakr came right away. Abu Bakr, he heard the message, immediately became Muslim. No questions, he was already a very close friend of Muhammad, he believed him 100%. Sayyidina Umar had a very different experience. And they say, all of them say that Sayyidina Umar came to Islam in steps. Right? There were small incremental steps that he took. And the first step that most of them recognize is a very small interaction that he had with one of the companions of the Rasul ﷺ. When they were getting ready, they were running away from Mecca because they were being persecuted, they were going to Abyssinia. He saw one of the Sahabiyat, a female companion of the Rasul ﷺ, prepping herself to leave. And Sayyidina Umar was among the harshest against the Muslims at this time. So he made kind of like a mocking comment, like, are you being chased out of your homes? And she responded very firmly and said, yes, because of your injustice to us, we're being forced to leave our homeland. And Sayyidina Umar, who was already even before Islam, was a very principled man, he admired her courage, and he felt for her. He didn't like oppression. He recognized that he was oppressing them. He didn't like it. So he told her, may you be, something to the effect of, may you be given a safe journey. Right? May you reach your destination in peace. And she was so shocked by this reaction that she went back to her husband and said, I think Umar might become a Muslim. He didn't become a Muslim then. It took a little while. And her husband told her, the donkey of Umar's father will become Muslim before Umar becomes Muslim. But this was, most historians tell you, this was the first step that Umar took towards Islam. Now we see a lot of things like this in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So for example, another person who no one can deny his life has had a massive impact on the world, and it continues to have a massive impact till this day, and it will until the end of time, is Jesus alayhi salam. The mother of Jesus, when we're told her story in the Quran of when she was given birth, she actually had a suicidal thought. And I don't say this to mock her, this is actually in the Quran. She says, I wish I had died before this moment, because she knows I'm going to have a kid, everyone's going to think I did something wrong, I didn't do anything wrong, I don't know how to explain it. How do you explain a kid? You can't explain it. So she had this thought. And then Allah says in the very next ayah, so she heard a voice coming from underneath her, that it tells her to have peace, and don't worry, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He gives her, if anyone comes to ask you about us today, just say that you're fasting, and so on. So she needed this moment, or this momentary reminder to get through this difficult moment. Or again, Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, no one can deny that you cannot be alive in the world today and not know the impact that Muhammad ﷺ has had. But many times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Muhammad, don't fear or don't feel sadness over what they say about you. They don't hate you because of you. They don't attack you, O Muhammad, because of you. They attack you because of this message that you have. So even Muhammad ﷺ needed this reminder. Now, the name we want to reflect on today is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Lateef. And Lateef is mentioned maybe 6 times or so in the Quran. All of them but one, it's coupled with the word Khabir. Wallahu Lateef al-Khabir. There's only one time where he says it at the middle of ayah, Khabir is not with him. And most of the times, it's mentioned at the end of a series of ayat that are discussing the expansiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. So in Surah Al-An'am, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on for about 4 ayat and He says, and I created the heavens and the stars. Right? These are major creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They take millennia to be created, the stars. And He says then at the end of the ayah, so that when you're lost in the ocean, you can find guidance through the stars. And then He says, and then we send down to the earth rain, and we bring forth from the earth vegetation, and then we bring all these different fruits. They seem so similar, but each one has a unique taste. So He starts from this grand thing, bringing down waters from the skies, and then He comes back to, it produces these nuanced fruits for you. And then He ends with the final ayah in this verse, in this set of verses is, and no sight can encompass Allah, and His sight encompasses everything, and He is Al-Lateef Al-Khabir. Al-Khabir means that He is completely knowledgeable of everything that there is to be to have knowledge of. Al-Lateef is a very interesting meaning. Now, it means essentially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only knows the greater scheme of things, not just the big things, He knows even the most minute, nuanced detail of everything that there is to know. And another ayah, for example, Sayyidina Luqman tells his son, "O my son, know that if a mustard seed worth, or mustard seed weight, or an atom's weight, if you want to put it in today's terms, if an atom's weight of something was inside of a rock, on a dark night, or anywhere else in the heavens of the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be able to pull it." And Allah explains this in another verse. He says, if I'm the one who created everything, I will know the major things about it, and I will know the most minute details about it. So Allah knows the major details about astronomy, about the stars, about all these mysteries of space that we're trying to find out. And He knows about the very smallest fungi that lives on your body that you may not pay attention to. And He knows about the smallest blood clot in your vein, or the blood cell in your veins that are moving through your body. Right? He knows about both equally. We still don't know today what the brain actually does. We know that certain things happen. We don't know what it does. Allah knows what it actually does, and He knows the minute impact that maybe our feeling sad today has on our brain. So why did I mention that story of Sayyidina Umar? Why did I mention that story of Sayyidina Umar, right? Sayyidina Umar, as we said, had this massive impact on the world. Whether you want to look at it from just a written text, or I had a massive impact on the world. But if it was not for this passing comment by this one woman, Sayyidina Umar may not have come to Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that for Sayyidina Umar to become the Umar of history, he needed to hear this one comment from this one woman years before he ever became a Muslim, and decades before he became the Khalifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for him to get through that struggle, he needed to hear these nice little reminders. You can go, by the way, Umar, you don't have to stop it. You can go. It's perfect. Have fun. Right? So Sayyidina Umar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that Sayyidina Muhammad needed to hear even these very small reminders. They don't hate you for you, they hate you for this message. And this is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Lateef. So He knew Umar's role in the world. He knew what Umar would eventually become, the role he would eventually play, but He also knew the emotions that Umar had to go through. He knew the struggles Umar had to face, so he can become the Umar of the history book. So how do we now, in light of this definition of Al-Lateef, how do we deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Al-Lateef? And I'll mention a couple of things quickly. The first one is, I think we have to get in the habit of leaving ourselves, our hearts and our minds opened to everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us through. See, way too often I think we go through life and we're writing a lot of what happens to us on a day-to-day basis off. It's not really that important, right? We went to the supermarket and we were annoyed and it didn't do anything for us. It was just an annoying experience. It doesn't really mean anything, right? Or we came to the masjid and we wanted to get up and play, and Ammar was telling us not to play. I don't know why he's telling me not to play. I just want to get up and play, right? So on and so forth. Every single one of these moments, if our hearts and minds are opened, you may find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you guidance, giving you messages, giving you some sort of comfort in these small little moments. But they only come if you're open. See, Umar couldn't have been affected by that statement, even though he wasn't Muslim yet, had he not been a man of principle and of dignity already, and someone who's objective and critical of himself. So that's the first thing I think we have to do. We have to kind of open ourselves up to this level of self-criticism at all times. The second thing now is somewhat related. I wanted to mention it because I think it's a problem. Too often I think we convince ourselves that we're very important people. And we're going to be really important people. Everyone in the world is going to know us. we're going to have a massive impact, we're going to be famous, we're going to be the next Sayyidina Umar or the next Jordan or the next LeBron, whoever you see as an impactful person, we're going to be that next person. But you may never become that. Most of us will never become anything like that. But you will be an important person to someone in your life. And Allah knows that you're going to play that role for that person. And He's preparing you now through these small moments and these small messages that He's giving you. So what I'm trying to say is detach yourself from this messed up idea that to be important, I have to be famous or I have to be big. To be important, you only have to be seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rida, and you only have to allow yourself to be guided by Him, and He will use you in someone's life. Umar didn't become a Muslim so he can become Khalifa. That's not why he became Muslim. He became Muslim because he believed it was right. And Allah eventually used him in the way that He used him. Right? So he came to Islam because he was open. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala led him to where he needed to be, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used him the way that He used him. And we all owe a debt of gratitude to Sayyidina Umar for being Muslim, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who recognize his characteristic Al-Lateef. I ask that He make us from those who make benefit of Ramadan and whose Ramadan is accepted. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.